So is masturbation normal?
So masturbation, or self-love or self-pleasuring, it has a couple different names. Yes, it's normal for people to have feelings of loving themselves or touching themselves, at least from like a biological point of view, totally normative. Although there are rare exceptions to that. Of course, some people's sexual orientation happens to be asexual, and they might not have any desire whatsoever to engage in self-love or self-touch. But on average, across the globe, most humans engage in some sort of self-touch unless the society, culture, religion dictates otherwise, and then they might not engage in that. But in general, there are lots of reasons why people masturbate. It relieves sexual tension. It provides a venue for self-exploration. It can be a shared experience, so people might engage in mutual masturbation, either where they masturbate each other or they might just engage in self-touch in front of each other. And it can help people physically relax, so it can relieve just physical pressure that someone might have or daily stress. One of the things I really recommend for people, though, is they should be masturbating in a way that's congruent with their own beliefs. And so if it's something that does make them feel uncomfortable, then they should, back off and figure out another way to do things that might make them feel better. There are tons of techniques that people can use, from just using digital masturbation with their hands, to toys, to water, to another partner, so on and so forth. And so there's lots of different ways that people can masturbate, and they really just have to find one that is congruent with their own beliefs and that they enjoy and that's comfortable and healthy for them.
So how can sexual behavior actually be used as a motivator?
Yeah, so there are motivations that people have for having sex. There are, in the United States, there's 3 primary reasons for having sex, or kind of the motivation behind having sex. The first is for traditional or reproductive reasons. About 30% of US Americans really believe in this traditional reproductive framework. And what I mean by that is they really think that the number one motivation for sex is to procreate, to have children. And typically that's within the confines of a monogamous relationship, typically one that's either domestic partnered or a marital relationship. So in terms of motivation, about 30% of the time it has something to do with actual procreation and attempting to make children. The next big reason is typically a recreational reason or motivation. About 25% of people in the US are having sex for those reasons, and it does tend to be more men than women. And recreationally means that, said in its simplest way, if it feels good and doesn't hurt anybody, then let's do it. And like I said, that's about a quarter of the people, and typically more men than women. And the final big motivator for sex, or reason behind sex, is a relational point of view. And that's actually become the most common reason or motivator for sex. It's about 45% of the people in the United States. And this is this idea that sex ideally should be accompanied with strong feelings or affection for someone, but not necessarily for procreation, not really for procreation, and not really only in the confines of a monogamous or a partnered or a marital context. And again, most people right now, at least in the US, view sex as being more of this relational viewpoint, and that's the main motivation. So I really like someone and I don't want to be married, but I still want to be close with them and intimate with them, and so I'm going to have sex with them. That's typically the most common motivation right now, is really this kind of affectional or feeling-based motivation for sex.
So is there anything else people need to know about human sexuality?
Well, I think it's helpful for people to understand a couple things around sexuality, whether it's their motivations or a social component to sexuality. And that is what I always tell my students, is that if you can't talk about sex, you probably shouldn't be having sex. And so if people can't engage in some sort of basic dialogue about their sexual wants, needs, experiences, past practices, future practices, health, if there's a history of sexually transmitted infection or disease, if you can't have conversations about sex, you probably don't have much business engaging in it, at least not with someone other than yourself. So that's really the biggest point that I think people, regardless of the lesson that we're giving them, that's really the biggest lesson that they need to know around human sexuality.